In the summertime, when the sleds are high, they can go and watch movies right on the spot. In the summertime, you got X-Men on your mind. That's about all I can get out.
There, this week it is Chris's turn.
For the record, you're hard to follow when it comes to both beat and tone.
Tune and tone. Welcome to our second blockbuster segment. I am Matt Ellison.
I'm Chris Fred.
We are the Cinema Sluts
of the Cinema Triforce. There's a lot coming out this summer, so we just had to tackle it headlong.
Yeah, there are probably some other things that we might end up doing this to also, but I just know we've neglected a lot of modern films, so thought we'd try and see how this works out, and obviously a couple of these movies have gathered people's attention.
A bit.
This time we're going to invert it. We're going to do it in reverse descending order, otherwise known as ascending order.
It's like so ascending.
Counter descending order. So from less best to better best.
Butterbean.
We're going to make you wait for X-Men. Because that's just who we are.
Because we had to as well.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I saw it last. The lowest rated and probably the one that we might have a mixed recommendation on. Chris and I haven't talked about this before we sat down to record, so I'm curious to see what he really thinks about it. A Million Ways to Die in the West from Seth MacFarlane.
His second directorial foray, with film at least. Obviously, he directs a lot of cartoons and stuff, and the guy's been doing it for a long time.
Yeah, and his writing actually goes all the way back to Dexter's Laboratory and Johnny Bravo.
Yeah.
Which I didn't realize that.
He's been around for a very long time. He was the youngest executive producer at Fox. I think he was 24 when he became executive producer on Family Guy, because, Family Guy's his baby. You can't deny that the guy's talented.
Well, and you also can't deny that he is tapped into the pulse. I don't care what people, and honestly, I think more people that are upset with Seth MacFarlane are probably fringe dwellers that aren't that happy about Hollywood in general, television in general. So they're already really hard-pressed to find something they like. Seth MacFarlane's not necessarily everybody's taste at all. The movies especially, Ted and this both have that nature of everything that they could do and as many F-bombs as they could get away with because they weren't on cable that he's been subjected to for, probably a decade now.
More, decades.
So we obviously have to put that warning out front. If you can't deal with the word fuck, then you probably don't want to go to this movie. Although it's great to hear Charlize Theron say it. It just feels good when she says it. I don't know why. Ted, I would say, is maybe a little stronger in the way it's put together, but they're both entertaining in their own right. This is a nice play on the idea of the West and the frontier and Westerns in general. Definitively MacFarlane, obviously, since he's frickin' starring in it. I wouldn't put him in, like, the Woody Allen place or RZA as an up-and-coming director. He's good enough as an actor, but I think it might have been even slightly better with a slightly different lead giving his words. This is written by Seth MacFarlane, also Alex Sulkin, who worked with him on a number of the different things, including Ted, and then also did some writing way back even into Craig Kilborn, and is writing for Dads currently. The other one that's worked with Sulkin is Wellesley Wild, working on some of the same stuff. And I kind of want to see Dads now, knowing that all these people are involved in the writing.
It's not good.
Really?
Watch it. Oh, it's not. Yeah. It's bad.
Man.
It's really bad.
I just like Seth Green and some of the other people involved, so I don't know.
I think one of the strongest things about the film was Joel McNeely's score, because it is really Wild West 60s kind of feel to it.
Definite tribute, for sure.
Oh, yeah. Seth MacFarlane, if you ever see him in interviews when he talks about either Family Guy or American Dad, he's utterly musical theater oriented. Like, he loves music, and it says one of his favorite things to do is go and watch them record the music for Family Guy.
That's the other thing you cannot fault for Family Guy and some of those shows, is that they are incredibly keen on the background music as critical part of the storytelling.
Riding on the bus, sitting next to bums, there's an open seat, hope there isn't pee. Because he has such a flair for it, he's able to make really good humor at it at certain times. The music isn't humor in this one, but you would swear to God this movie was scored in 1961.
If anything, that's maybe the thorn in its side, or in your side as you're watching it, is the love angle and him being kind of a forlorn guy in the West. It doesn't work all of the time. It kind of pulls away from the story. And the music, especially like the draw in for the love story portions, that's of course the thing that gets me. I don't know how it got Chris. But the action scenes and the optimistic Western music, fantastic. And there's a lot of serious moments with the gang and with the threat and with a lot of doom moments. There's a lot of stuff that comes in and it really changes the mood heavily and then just goes to another scene and now it's uplifting again.
I think the weakest part of this is that they don't apologize for the fact that it's all modern language and stuff like that. And you're not asking them to be period. Obviously, they're aware of this, but you just have to be in the mood. Like, for example, my mother would never watch this film because of the language, but because of the fish out of water subject matter. He's talking about Parkinson's before Parkinson's was ever even, like, discovered. It works. In true McFarlane style, he does go over the top a few times. He does Sly Stallone, as it were, because there were like 3 or 4 moments where I'm like, and here, oh, man. To be fair, one is amazing because I can only imagine what Neil Patrick Harris thought when he just at least read it on the script, where he's like, wait, what do I need to do?
Neil Patrick Harris, who we talked about in episode 66 for Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. Mr. Starship Hauser himself.
He's had this huge resurgence now just because of who he is and him being out and gay and him being a very, very prevalent activist and stuff like that, but also because of How I Met Your Mother.
How I Met Your Trooper, of course.
Barney, the ironically enough cast complete misogynist on that show. So tongue-in-cheek. Giovanni Ribisi, who we've talked about before in episode
79 for Basic, and then in 27 for
Fly of the Phoenix.
Yes, he's so good in that.
Oh, he's excellent in that one. He's very comedic.
Yeah, he's great. He's another one of those guys, and for people that watched My Name is Earl, he's really good at comic stuff and timing, so it's nice to see him do what he doesn't do all the time. I mean, Mod Squad obviously is where he really picked up, but he'd been, in television since the 80s. One of those guys I always like to see.
Now, have you seen Amanda Seyfried in that much stuff?
I was trying to think about it, and I'm like, I know her name, but to look through the list of things, I really haven't seen much.
I've seen her in Mamma Mia. I saw her in Chloe, which that was a kind of a weird movie where I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, Liam Neeson's actually in Chloe with her, so I kind of wondered if that ended up being a tie-in as far as them seeking each other out. Like, get her.
Have you seen Chloe?
She must be taken into this role.
Have you seen that, Chloe?
I haven't.
You will enjoy Chloe because there's Amanda Seyfried, Julianne Moore pairing in that very, wait, what?
Quote, wink, wink, pairing. And then along those lines, she got the role that Lindsay Lohan didn't get, Lovelace.
Yeah.
For that flick, which I never did see.
I'd like to see that as well.
One that I did see along those same lines, except much stupider, Jennifer's Body. If I remember right, her character was actually kind of cool. She created an interesting character in an otherwise wholly uninteresting movie. And I still say, damn you, Jay. I swear you recommended I watch that movie, and you say no.
Charlize Theron, we talked about last week, so just go back 1 week.
Although, I have to say, I can't help but paint her in a more positive light. It sounds weird to say, I enjoyed her more in this movie.
Oh, no, I do too.
Than in Prometheus.
Oh, yeah, easily.
The thing about Charlize Theron is that she always is full-on committal no matter what she's doing. Even if it's marginally bad role or a really bad movie, she's really only given comedy so many times, which I think she actually excels at.
Arrested Development.
Yeah, Arrested Development, of course, but I want to go back and actually watch Young Adult now just to see. I think she has a comedic role in Hancock as well, but I just don't remember. Definitely Tats in this movie. She's great.
Sarah Silverman?
We'll probably talk about her for Way of the Gun, for what small role she has. This is probably one of the bigger roles that she's had outside of doing stand-up comedy and her own TV show and stuff. But mostly it's just been random appearances or stuff on shows. This is the biggest thing I've seen her in. I think she's charming. She does what she's supposed to do well enough. It's an interesting role that she has to take on for sure. And she's great with Ribisi.
I say the same thing with Liam Neeson in this. I love Liam Neeson, but he's completely wasted in this movie. He just doesn't work at all. He's great, but in this one I'm just sort of they just want to use his name,
This seems to be the summer of that, and this batch of movies in particular seems like a lot of people that could have used a little more time.
We'll get to that.
Liam Neeson's one of them, and we may talk about him for Kinsey. We've already talked about Liam Neeson for episode 29, 62, 63, so check those movies out.
And there's a lot of other little tiny cameos in this. I mean, there's a Wes Studi cameo, the guy from Last of the Mohicans. He's a very prevalent Native American actor.
Right.
There's a Ewan McGregor cameo. There's a wonderful Ryan Reynolds cameo that you're really happy with.
Oh yeah, I didn't think about the reason why. That's a great scene to enjoy. And the best cameo I've seen since Zombieland.
But we won't do it.
Similarly, people do not tell other people about that because that has to be experienced. That was so awesome.
Did you see it coming, though?
The moment it was leading up, I'm like, this has to be, but no way. But it has to be. It better. It is.
It's awesome.
So cool.
The movie was enjoyable. I had fun watching it.
A lot of good laughs.
Yeah, it was crude and it's over the top, but that's Seth MacFarlane. It is a great late-night movie. That's what it works for. It's not family film.
Definitely not that. It's kind of like early Eddie Murphy movies coming out of Saturday Night Live or going into later.
No, you didn't.
There's just some really great stuff, even referring to sort of the history aspect of it, that nobody smiled in photos. They kind of refer to that in that era where you never see people smiling. So it's totally a shtick that goes throughout the film, them talking about that.
But would you suggest it? Does it have to have our stamp of approval?
Totally, man. This is rated a 6.5, I think, already on IMDb. And I would say between the three three of them. That is kind of where it belongs, where it's not quite as solid as the ones we're going to get to, but I really had a good time with it, and I think if you like Ted, this one should leave a relatively similar flavor in your mouth, but not feel like he just did exactly the same thing. He's good enough about creating some variety, and it's a fun movie for sure.
Now, on to a surprising thing that doesn't usually happen to us at the Cinema Triforce, where a Disney movie that's not associated with Marvel actually gets our approval.
2014's, oh wait, it's out right now. Maleficent, Malfeasant, Malkovich,
Malnourishment.
Malcatraz, Machine.
The movie's really hit and miss. There are parts in this movie that I really, really dig, and other parts where I was like, oh, okay, it's Disney. And the moments where it is weakest, it falls into that Disney rut that Oz the Great and Powerful fell into, that Alice in Wonderland fell into. That being said, there were 2 or 3 moments in this where I was like, wow, they did that in a Disney film. And not because it's over the top. All of a sudden there was sex or stuff like that. I was just more like, that's really kind of unstereotypical of them.
Jay and I were talking about this with The Lone Ranger, and that I think they're coming to sort of a renaissance.
That they're just being able to recognize the audience is changing?
Yeah, honestly. But I mean, that's what it is sort of, to me, a rebirth of the recognition. Because they did this a few times between the 70s and 80s.
The black hole.
But they took a dip and really have dwelt in a safe zone for a long time. But I feel like they're getting out of that a little bit. This guy who directed it, Robert Stromberg. This
First film?
First film. However, bury those surprise faces down a little bit. Under 94 movies he worked on doing visual effects. Oh. So, I mean, anymore, somebody that does visual effects probably has done half of a movie in rendering.
Oh, yeah.
Or more than that. So it's not as big of a brag. It's kind of like saying that, Lawrence of Arabia was Peter O'Toole's first movie. Yeah, after
years on the stage.
Decades on theater, yeah.
And that is by far the strongest part of this whole movie, is that it's
Peter O'Toole. It's fantastic in this film.
Gorgeous. It looks so wonderful, because there are moments with Alice in Wonderland, I think as I mentioned in the podcast, we were kind of like, I think we're trying a little too hard to show how different Wonderland is, or Underland, as they call it, how different it is from the real world. This one, there are certain moments where they bring it back in visually so that people will recognize things. Because so much of the stuff in this isn't real. And I don't mean like it's CG. I mean like these fantasy creatures aren't real. These crazy huge thing of thorns aren't real. But like the part where she's in her wings and she soars up the clouds and like is in the sunrise or the sunset. Almost everybody's seen a sunrise or a sunset. So I think him being a visual artist and director coming from before, he was able to put those staccato moments in that where it's like, hey, let's bring them back to something that they know and let's utilize that as the pace of the imagery throughout the movie.
If anything, that's what this movie was sort of striving to do in its telling, was to bring you out of utmost fantasy and fairy tale vagary, let's say, or ambiguity, that they're not human beings, but what humanity they have, or the way they're similar to us, is this.
Yeah.
And with Maleficent, of course, by the time you see her in the original cartoon, Sleeping Beauty, which we talked about in episode 96. Take a moment, listen to that, won't you? Pretty good, huh? So, yeah. Here they're trying to introduce some of the backstory, in this case, maybe even telling some alternate aspects of the story. Linda Wolverton, that did the writing for this, we actually also talked about her writing Mulan in the episode 96 for Disney. And then she did happen to write Alice in Wonderland. So that means we talked about that movie and how it kind of failed in episode 17 for our It Should Have Been Better episode. She actually will be doing Through the Looking Glass coming up.
So hoping.
Yeah, I'm hoping maybe what came out of this will lean into what happens with the Looking Glass, and I don't know, just not get out of the buffoonery. That, if anything, that's what was so nice about this.
Don't have Tim Burton do it.
It didn't lean on any stupidity.
Yeah.
It didn't dumb it down. Was this PG or PG-13?
I think it was PG.
I don't know that I could say take your kids to it, because I'm never good at gauging that in the first place.
No, you aren't. but for the record, neither am I. So, and I grew up with 2 much younger brothers, so I should be.
Go elsewhere with that. But here we're to say it's definitely an enjoyable experience. I didn't come away disappointed. Where
I heard you yawn once when we were watching it, but that's usually not really an indicator, but I can tell where you're like, if you yawn, it's sort of like, okay, let's go.
No, but I wasn't groaning. I mean,
you don't groan. The only time I've heard you groan in the theater was the
Die Hard?
Oh, God, you said it. Now we have to spit, turn around 3 times, and go eat a Twinkie. If you can sit down, Matt, and you can enjoy, for all intents and purposes, a youth movie, it's a success. And I mean a modern youth movie. I'm not talking The Lost Boys.
Do you say youths?
Excuse me, Matt. 2 youths.
We actually talked about Angelina Jolie in episode 13 for The Bone Collector, which I forgot about. It's weird how little we've talked about her. And then in my head, as I'm looking through her history, I'm realizing I actually haven't seen her in that many movies. Yet everything I have seen her in, I have thought she was top shelf. I don't mean that in a euphemistic way. I mean, she's actually a really good performer.
Yeah, she's great in this.
She's a beautiful woman, but she's a really good performer. And having only probably seen 4 of her films, I don't think I saw Girl Interrupted all the way through for some reason. I don't remember I got all the way through that.
She's so great in that movie.
Like Pushing 10, just a handful of movies. But I've always thought she's really good. I saw Wanted. And
that's not too bad.
The movie, it's all right, but she's great.
Yeah.
Girl Interrupted, we'll probably get to. Elle Fanning, we talked about in episode 52.
Woo! For Super 8, she was great in this.
I liked her better in Super 8 for what they asked her to do.
Yeah.
But she's doing what she's supposed to do in this, and some people are already disagreeing about that. Meh. Benjamin Button would probably be the other thing that you would know Elle Fanning for outside of what we've already talked with her about. I really hope she has a prosperous career because she is superb most of the time.
Oh, she will. You know who's used the worst in this is, quite frankly, Sholto Copley, who plays King Stefan, because that man is an amazing actor. You watch The A-Team, which we talked about in episode
62,
and you watch District 9, which we will get to.
Yes.
Like, he's an amazing freaking actor. And I also heard that he is in the remake of Oldboy that Spike Lee did. He's such a good actor, and this one he's wasted. I find it very unlikely he didn't prepare.
Sure.
One of the other complaints about this movie is that there are a couple of moments where I'm like, if you guys are going to use tropes, at least use good tropes. We're going this angle?
Other than that, there aren't really a lot of other people. The guy that plays the bird character effectively in this.
Oh, Sam Riley?
Sam Riley. Don't know him from anything else.
I recognized Emile Destanton and Juno Temple as 2 of the fairies. You know, that Juno Temple has done a lot of youth stuff, and Emile Destanton, everybody who's a Harry Potter fan would know her, and then she was in Vera Drake.
Did you say Ute? She was in what?
She was in Vera Drake. But yeah, everybody else, there are secondaries in this because it is Jolie's movie. Well, first of all, they did a great job with her makeup design because she has wings. Those are amazing in terms of how they utilized it. Like,
she has wings. I don't have any.
I think what they did with wings in this works a lot better than what they were trying to do with Legion, the movie about angels attacking man that had Paul Bettany in it. And if it can be done right, angels can be like really, really awesome. And how she looks in this, so well done in terms of how she flies and awesome.
The one thing I have to disagree on with that is the makeup. Jolie already almost has that face. They could have done a little bit of shadowing on it to accentuate it, and it would have shown up through the shots. People that listen to us that do makeup and effect stuff, they could have done it better. I felt like they did it wrong, and it was never questioned because you can see the shading in it. It doesn't look natural. I feel like it's bad stage makeup.
Oh, I think I kind of put that the way to her being Faye. That's where I logged it when I watched it. But yeah, you bring up a good point.
I wonder if it could have looked better. To me, it felt like a shortcoming more than a choice. There have been times where those choices are deliberate. This one, it felt like a deliberate intent, but it didn't feel like a deliberate result as far as the way it looked. That said, everything else otherwise, and God, her voice was so perfect.
Yeah, she really did her homework to mirror Eleanor Audley, the original Maleficent, because the scene where she comes and presents the gift, those are almost the exact same lines. She has the same timbre, and there's even one moment where she does it better, where I'm like, whoa.
I just wish she'd gotten My Pet in more times.
I know, I was doing the same thing too.
There's just, if anything, a couple little tributary moments that I felt like were maybe lacking, and that... The theme, and I've already said this online, so I feel bad for people that happen to have seen our comments, but I don't know how many of you guys are friends with us directly.
Listening to the podcast. Shut up, Matt. You always said that on Facebook.
You already said that. I already liked it when you said that. Her theme, like the original theme wasn't in there. God, I came home and listened to it last night because I wanted to hear it so bad. Because it had like a female voice in there, and like the clarinet or the oboe. Mm-hmm. Boom! And a huge hit. It would have worked. There was no reason for it not to work. I think sometimes there's the notion in people's heads that, we can't recycle that, we can't reuse it, it's old, it wouldn't feel right. I'm like,
this whole movie.
Some stuff, it feels perfectly, that's timeless. I think you could have got away with it.
Yeah, could have.
The morality in this is so weird and flippant in that, like, sometimes it's really hard to determine because Disney is often the time, and maybe that is their point, is leaving it sort of gray area, but it
ambiguous.
Felt like there were some times where they were telling you some weird things, like, you should forget my past, or forget our past, or your past. Now we can just move forward. I'm like, there's a part of that that has a good lesson. There's another part of that where you can really set yourself up for failure or hopefulness beyond practical experience.
Odd ambiguity in terms of the lessons that this movie's trying to teach, but that's a whole nother podcast. Let's just say,
Huh. The only thing that seemed really consistent the whole movie was that the good people were stupid. Evil will always triumph because good is dumb. It was really weird how that fell through favorably. Now, mind you, it may well be, and maybe this is just what I didn't take away from it, to where I was looking at the movie versus the perspective, and that Maleficent, it is her tale, and it is maybe the idea of the lens of personal experience jading everything so that these people were total dimwits. They knew nothing, and they screwed everything up. I don't know, man. I almost felt like there could have been some stronger way to indicate that, so you'd kind of see the bias
for sure
at some point, maybe later in the film. And then viscerally, there's probably one story plot. I'm sure there's a couple that some people would get really cynical and say, oh, this. But for what it is, there was one of those blazing things that kind of got me miffed in that earlier she does this exact thing with one of her weaknesses, and then later she's downtrodden by this weakness. You already saw her get past earlier, and I was kind of like, you kind of missed that. What's your take on this versus the original Disney telling of the story, Chris?
I like that it tries to take it in another direction and modernize it in a sense, but there are shades of gray. Because the original is very painted black and white. You don't want to know what her motivation is. You have no idea why she's doing it. All it insinuates that she was just, she wasn't invited and that's all. You're like, oh, spiteful bitch. That kind of thing. Where in this one, you're like, oh, it gives backstory. And it isn't bad. Like, it's a little shoddy at some moments, as I said, cliched. But there are other moments where I'm like, oh, you guys did this. Okay, this makes up for the fact that you kind of faltered before. Like, it is at the very least worth a screening. Because if it's going to be a retelling of an old tale, we don't know what the original Hansel and Gretel was about. We don't know what the original, Red Riding Hood was about. Like, a lot of the stuff Grimm's put down, but they said they took from stuff that they heard. So when a lot of people know, like, oh, they're remaking it so crappy, it's like a lot of the oral stories changed when they were retold from generation to generation.
Right.
And they adapted to the new morality, pardon that term. And this one, like, there's one kind of analogous to rape thing in this where I'm like, damn. And I brought that up to you going upstairs and you're like, wow, I guess I didn't see that. And it wasn't like, and you weren't like, man, that totally went over my head. You were just like, oh, another way of approaching it. That's interesting. And I think it's great that because of this movie, a Disney movie, they brought up new questions.
Yeah. Whether or not that strikes you, there's a moment where you'll see violation in any form where somebody is suffering with that. And the reaction to that is awesome. That scene itself. And I don't mean it's awesome that it happened. I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome.
I got you.
It's awesome to see the identity that I think a lot of people could have with that loss. It's a great movie, and I come out liking the original cartoon better because among any Disney films, that's very rooted in what I appreciate about a lot of things, and in particular those cartoons. That one is really strong and really interesting in the way it went at it. It's a little bit tighter, but I have to say, you do need to see this movie. It's very well done. Anybody that was excited, you should be appreciative of what it does. I don't think you'll even be as critical as we necessarily are by our demand for what we must do for the sake of the people. However, if you're a Disney lover, if you're already like gaga over the brand, you'll be head over heels. It's a great film in that way.
All right, so let's get to our full-on stamp.
Days of Future Past.
A movie we've been waiting for since the X-Men cartoon from Fox in the mid-90s.
Since the mornings of past
Saturday.
Future.
Yeah. Days of Future Past, X-Men. The return of Bryan Singer to the X-Men franchise. Thank frickin' God. Thanks to the awesomeness that was First Class. And make no mistake, I was not at all excited for that movie. And then I watched it, and I was like, Matthew Vaughn totally breathed some amazing life into this film.
By that point, some people had seen Layer Cake, but most people weren't really familiar with what Matthew Vaughn could do as a director. He worked under Guy Ritchie that did Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. But Layer Cake is also a great film, a good Daniel Craig film if you want to see something outside of James Bond, where he's not necessarily the guy who gets away with everything.
And he was originally slated to do this, but then it fell through, but then Singer came on, was like, hey, I know this. I know all this material.
What happy accidents. And a fantastic way to bring it back around, because a lot of people were looking at Bryan Singer as being the guy who couldn't necessarily do it anymore after Superman.
Yeah.
Which I still like.
I wouldn't go so far as to say brilliant, but it really works well. Paced beautifully. I mean, there's one or two parts where with the time travel, it kind of came close. Not quite so like, hey, let's have an argument about this with our friends. time travel kind of stuff. But it's ballsy to have editing with an action sequence and to cross timelines. That's a ballsy move.
Yeah. Just about everybody returns that should or you would want to return to it. Everybody from First Class, the lion's share of the original 2 X-Men films in particular.
The only new ones you have in this are the mutants from the future. You have Bishop, Blink, and
Warpath.
Those are really the only ones you see. Everybody else is returning.
They're not pivotal line characters, they're pivotal story characters through the ones that Chris just listed. Bing Bing Fan, Omar Sy, and Boo Boo Stewart, and then Daniel Enmore. A lot less time on screen, but they're a significant part of the story.
And the geeks are going to recognize them because they're like, oh my god, Bishop! Oh my god, Warpath! You know.
Right. Nicholas Hoult as Beast. Warm Bodies, I think, came out in between these movies, and that actually is fairly well received and definitely made its money back. I still need to get around to see that. Ellen Page.
Hard Candy.
Yeah, we talked about her for Inception in episode 39, and we will get to Hard Candy. Juno, of course, although I don't know that we'll need to talk about that, but it's what most people saw her for. Whip It, I still need to see. And I forgot she was actually in X3. But, well, it's because most of us have done our best to forget all of X3 anyway. As a writer, Matthew Vaughn actually did take part in that, along with Simon Kinberg and Jane Goldman. Vaughn, we actually talked about with Kick-Ass in episode 50, that Evan Peters was in fact a part of it. Evan Peters, who plays Quicksilver, one of the only new characters. Awesome.
Yeah.
Like his part in this, and I just finished watching the first season of American Horror Story this last couple weeks. He's great in that show in the first season, and I'm pretty sure he's good in the second season as well. I really enjoyed the time that he spent on screen and what they did with his character. It was really fun and very cool.
Singer definitely knows how to do period really well, and one of his scenes in this is by far what solidified this movie into my head, where I was like, oh, they're doing pretty good, and they got to the scene, and all of a sudden they cut out all the noise and just brought in a song, and I was like, wow, that's awesome.
It is great, and it's exactly how some of us live our lives, especially once we got MP3 players and it wasn't going to skip while we're running around dancing.
Damn Discman.
I'm not saying he was dancing, I'm just saying, well, that's what we do. The other stuff that Matthew Vaughn, going back to Stardust, a lot of people are huge fans of that. Kingsman, that's coming up, is actually his. Simon Kinberg goes back into like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Jumper, and Sherlock. So those are some strong stories to come into. And then Jane Goldman has pretty much worked with Matthew Vaughn on most of the projects that he wrote and or directed along with Stardust. And another one, if you're looking for something as an alternate Daniel Radcliffe, as opposed to seeing him in all the Harry Potters, there's one that she did called Woman in Black.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, may well be interesting. I still haven't seen it. Dinklage! Peter Dinklage, Peter Dinklage, Peter Dinklage.
Tyrion Lannister and The Station Agent is probably what people know him best for.
Death at a Funeral is a great Frank Oz film that Chris and I have both watched, and who knows, maybe we'll talk about it. He's great, man. Every chance we've seen him, he's good.
Oh, yeah.
We'll probably be watching him after Game of Thrones ends this season. We'll maybe watch Knights of Badassdom over here at Echo Base.
We'll try to do that.
One of the people that, for this film, is a little underused.
Not little, he is underused.
Regardless of what the politics may be, and we don't know either of those, I was a little put out watching the end credits for how some of the people that were given higher billing yet had way less time on screen.
Yeah, whatever.
It's that stupid politics. Or I think the amount of time on screen ought to help dictate where you are in the listing.
Yeah, I'd say that's a fair appraisal.
But they're not asking me, nor Chris, so I guess that's what they get.
It's probably why we're recording in my bedroom.
I just loved that in the time period when they're in the 70s, that they managed to get somebody to say the line, and it's totally legitimate that they get Magneto to say, I don't know karate, but I know crazy.
Oh, yeah.
It was all I could do to sit in the theater and not just be like, yes, he does!
I didn't get to see this with Matt. I watched it with Danny, and so that's the one thing I was kind of sad. I was like, I'd love to have seen your reactions to certain bits in this.
That and the cameo of frickin' Sanford and Son.
I knew you were going to lose it. I knew it.
It was so fantastic, and I was loving it. A lot of really choice moments in this film. This is easily the most balanced of the three.
Oh, my God, yes.
In that things don't feel out of place, I would say, for all, the Marvel we talked about last week and the stuff that's come out the last few years, it's one of the most balanced of the Marvel stories told, certainly between this Spider-Man and Captain America.
Oh, yeah.
Where I didn't find those moments where you're like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
There were none of those. I can't think of a single one that even pays tribute to itself all the way back to the first X-Men movie.
Yep.
With him coming through a metal detector. And I was like, that's awesome. Because a lot of people would miss that or just kind of get it. You're like, oh, I see, it's different. You're like, no. Not only is it different, but it's different from what we did, in fact, see over a decade ago. It's good, and it still has a lot of the cool lines, which X-Men was good in the early 2000s for beating out Spider-Man in the Raimi attempts at giving you stuff to walk away with.
The heart aspect of it. That's why when we covered X2, like, up to a certain point, it was my favorite superhero movie, because Singer does know how to balance the heart into it. Even though there are a couple little melodramatic moments in that movie, he knows how to lead with an action sequence. Brilliant.
Yeah, the notion that Professor X is having about the idea of bearing the pain of others and bearing your own pain to move through and to have that strengthen you and concretize you. It's very cool. And again, not dwelled upon, but it's a good moment in the film. There's a lot of little stuff like that.
Even just in face acting and stuff, there's a moment between Jennifer Lawrence and Michael Fassbender where I'm like, Jesus. It has this kind of like your life is in my hands, and it's between people who were at one time lovers. And they convey it perfectly where I was like, oh my God. And it's there and then it's gone.
Yeah. I liked how even in the 70s, they gave you some moments that resembled Zapruder.
Best part of the period stuff is that you would have this moment of just action sequence, and all of a sudden it would cut to like Super 8 or like TV footage of the people filming it to where like stuff would be out of focus, like it would be. Brilliantly done for editing. Perfect. I mean, that is another hook in me. Hellraiser hook. Jesus wept, as it were.
Yes, Bryan Singer opened the box yet again for us.
Yeah.
Speaking of that was the one thing that I thought they kind of did, and if people who have seen it, they'll know what I mean when I say it, that they did kind of create a skeleton key for themselves.
Yeah.
I hope they don't exploit it too far, because you know they're going to make another movie out of this.
I gotta have faith.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
No.
As we're still recording a couple years from now, we'll talk about that when the next X-Men film comes out and see what happens with our projections. Bryan Singer seems to know well enough what to do and what not to do, so that they gave this out. They maybe made room for actors to do certain things. Morty, it wasn't anything sour at all to witness it, except to say like, okay, I see what they did, but at the moment I don't care. As long as they don't ruin it with it, I'm good to go. Probably the one thing by the end of it, there's so much great action in the movie. Some people might not appreciate the climax.
The weakest part is the third act, where you're just sort of like, this is what happens when you make the rest of your movie so good. You're like, oh crap, what are we gonna do?
That was what I was actually going to say about all three of these films, and that I feel that almost all of them had not as much Maleficent, but certainly Million Ways to Die in the West and X-Men. There were certain moments where the focus of the trailers kind of set up weird expectations.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
For what you get in the movie.
Yeah.
Though, again, it's only by having the retention of what they were exposing you to and what you kind of expect.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people will necessarily be that disappointed by it. It'll leave room for them to just go way off the rails when the next one comes out, and I really hope that's where they go. Like, okay, now we've spent 2 movies setting it up. Now we're just going. Now it's aliens. You know the course. Here's a whole bunch of stuff, and we're going to make them fight.
And on that note, why don't we go, Matt?
Okay.
Okay, it sounds like a good idea. And
okay.
Also, and also, just as a little teaser, all I want to say is En Sabah Nur. Because, holy crap, awesome. If you were in any way, shape, or form a fan of X-Men, stay for the stinger. I was like, I was staring at Danny, and I got up, and I was like, oh! And everyone's like, why is that guy, what's going on? I don't get it. And, oh, you will. Oh, you're gonna get it.
Assassin's Creed? What?
Awesome. Second installment in our summer movie series, Blockbusters of Modern, because we wanted to do it for you.
Yes.
Our avid listeners.
Possibly the second and last, possibly the second, and with more to come. We'll see how the summer plays out. Let us know if you have any requests. We've always kind of said that. Well, we've always absolutely said that. If you have any movies, themes that you want us to go with, and we'll figure out the movies based on that, suggestions, send us something at the Cinema Triforce on Facebook, and like us while you're there, if you don't mind. Send us an email at cinemasluts@gmail.com, which will get a link back onto the Podbean site that I think fell off when part of our redesign process. Certainly that stands with modern films as well. If there's something that you think we ought to go out of our way to see in the theater and kind of give a recommendation, because we've done that a lot of times, sort of a button hook at the end of an episode, even if we're talking about 3 older films or, you know, somewhat contemporary, but we're not talking about what's out in the moment. Certainly we can tack on a couple minutes of something we just got to see, even if we can't figure out a way to talk about it directly. You know, there were just so many batches of good films coming out in the beginning of the summer season. We thought it was worthwhile, since we knew we were going to go see these movies anyway.
Come on.
Why not share with you our experience? Because you are our number one guys and girls.
So on that note, we're going to go out singing.
She's lost it, Chris.
Who's lost it, Matt?
She has. She's lost it.
I think Diana's lost that love and feeling.
God, I hate it when she does that.
Diana, this one's for you.
Well, you can close your eyes if you want when we pod our cast. Ooh. And we'll keep you entertained from the first moment to the last. Ooh. You're trying hard not to show it, baby. But baby, I know it. This is the tale of Captain Jack Sparrow.
I'm Chris Fred.
I'm Matt Ellison.
And we are the Cinema Sluts.
Of the Cinema Track Force.
Sluts out.
You're late.
For what?
Fair enough. Can you say that, Albert? Wrapped candies.
But this is just the outside. There's these folds. This is my first vagina.
That'll be kind of hard. I was sent here from the future. By you. So you were always an asshole.
In the future, you and I will be good friends. But you just don't know it yet. That's pride fucking with you see.
Ripley, we are leaving.
This should be fun. I'm holding you so you don't get whiplash.
What?
Whiplash.
I don't know karate, but I know crazy.
Yes, the deal.
Stop whining. Game over, man. We're fun. We're finished. Now what are we supposed to do? We're in some real pretty shit now.
They cut the power, Charles.
What do you mean they cut the power? They're animals.